The rain had finally stopped when Daniel stepped into the lobby of the Grandview Hotel. Water dripped from his jacket onto the polished marble floor, and he felt immediately out of place. Everything around him screamed money. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. The walls were covered in art that probably cost more than he'd earned in 10 years. Even the air smelled expensive, like imported flowers and old money. Daniel was there to deliver food. Nothing fancy about that. He'd picked up 3 orders from an upscale restaurant downtown, and this was his last stop for the night. After this, he could head home to his daughter. Maybe they'd watch a movie together if she wasn't too tired from her treatments. The thought made him walk faster toward the front desk. The concierge barely looked at him, just pointed to where he should set the bags and handed him a tablet to sign. Daniel fumbled with the stylus, his hands stiff from gripping the steering wheel in the cold. His fingers were covered in small cuts and calluses. Working 3 jobs did that to you. That's when he heard it. Music floating through the air, soft but clear. Piano music. The kind that makes you stop and listen even when you're in a hurry. It was coming from somewhere deeper in the hotel. Probably from the big event he'd heard staff whispering about. Some charity gala for rich people to feel good about themselves while wearing clothes that cost more than his rent. Daniel loved music once. Really loved it. But that felt like another lifetime ago, back when he had dreams instead of just responsibilities. He was about to leave when a voice cut through the lobby. Sharp. Amused. The kind of voice used to being heard. Well, look at this. A delivery man who appreciates classical music. Daniel turned. A woman stood near the entrance to the ballroom, surrounded by 5 or 6 people in evening wear. She was maybe 40, dressed in a silver gown that caught the light with every movement. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes had that particular brightness of someone who'd had a few drinks and was feeling bold. I wasn't, Daniel started, but she was already walking toward him, her heels clicking on the marble. Don't be modest. I saw you pause. You were listening. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone about to enjoy themselves at someone else's expense. Do you know what piece that is? Daniel did know. He knew exactly what it was, but something in her tone made him want to say no and leave. Still, honesty had always been his weakness. Chopin. Nocturne, I think, her smile widened. Oh, wonderful. A cultured delivery driver. How refreshing. Her friends laughed right on cue. Tell me, do you play? This was dangerous territory. Daniel could feel it. I used to. A long time ago. Used to. She repeated it like she was tasting the words. How tragic. Let me guess, life got in the way? Had to pay bills? Support a family? She wasn't wrong, but the way she said it made his past sound like a joke. Something like that, Daniel said quietly. He picked up his empty delivery bag. I should go. Wait. The woman held up one hand. She was enjoying this now, he could tell. Her friends had moved closer, sensing entertainment. I have a proposition for you. See, my father left me this hotel, along with quite a lot of money, and a rather expensive Steinway piano that's been sitting in that ballroom collecting dust since he died. Daniel said nothing. Where was this going? My father was obsessed with Chopin. Absolutely obsessed. He used to say that if someone could play Chopin properly, they understood something essential about life. She paused for effect. I always thought that was ridiculous. Music is just sound. Pretty sound sometimes, but just sound. One of her friends, a bald man with glasses, chuckled nervously. Victoria, what are you doing? So her name was Victoria. Of course it was. I'm making things interesting, Robert. Victoria turned back to Daniel. Here's my offer, Mr. Delivery Driver. You come into that ballroom right now. You sit at my father's precious piano, and you play one Chopin piece, just one. If you can play it well, properly, the way my sentimental father would have appreciated, I'll give you everything in my wallet right now. Cash. No questions asked. Daniel felt his heart speed up. Everything in her wallet could mean a lot. These people didn't carry 20s. But there had to be a catch. And if I can't? Victoria's smile turned sharp. Then you become the evening's entertainment. My guests have donated a lot of money tonight. They deserve a good story. The delivery man who thought he could play Chopin. More laughter from her group. Daniel should have said no, should have walked right out those doors and never looked back. But then he thought about his daughter, about the medical bills stacked on his kitchen counter, about the specialist appointment next month that insurance wouldn't fully cover, about how he was already stretched so thin that one more expense might break everything. Which piece? He heard himself ask. Victoria looked delighted. Oh, he's considering it. How brave. She tapped one finger against her chin, thinking. Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. My father played it at my mother's funeral. Can you manage that, or should we pick something easier? The Nocturne in E-flat major, of course. It was one of Chopin's most famous pieces, but also one of the most emotionally complex. Easy to play badly. Almost impossible to play well. You needed more than technical skill. You needed to understand what Chopin was trying to say with those notes. Daniel hadn't touched a piano in 3 years. Not since his wife died. Not since everything fell apart and life became about survival instead of anything else. His hands probably didn't even remember how to move properly, but 3 years ago he could have played that nocturne in his sleep. Okay, he said. The word came out steady, even though his heart was hammering. I'll do it. Victoria clapped her hands together once, sharp and final. Excellent. Robert, tell the others we have a special performance. This is going to be fun. As Daniel followed her toward the ballroom, her group trailing behind like a parade, he wondered what he'd just agreed to. Through the tall doorway he could see the party. At least 60 people in evening wear holding champagne glasses, talking in clusters. A massive piano sat on a small stage at the far end of the room, gleaming black under the lights. His hands started trembling. Not from fear exactly. From memory. From the weight of everything that piano represented. Every dream he'd had, every dream he'd lost. Every piece of himself he'd buried to keep going. Victoria was talking to some guests, gesturing toward Daniel with obvious amusement. He could see them looking at him. At his delivery jacket, at his worn shoes. Judging. Deciding he would fail before he played a single note. Daniel took a deep breath and started walking toward the piano. Maybe this was a mistake. Probably it was a mistake. But he was here now and his daughter needed that money and maybe, just maybe, his hands still remembered what to do. The ballroom seemed to grow quieter with each step. Or maybe that was just in his head. Either way, by the time Daniel reached the piano, he could hear his own heartbeat. Loud and fast and terrified. He sat down on the bench. The keys stared back at him like old friends he'd abandoned. Like a part of himself he'd tried to forget. Behind him, Victoria's voice rang out. Ladies and gentlemen, we have unexpected entertainment tonight. Let's see if delivery drivers can play Chopin. Laughter rippled through the room. Daniel closed his eyes and let his hands hover over the keys. Just for a moment. Just one moment to remember who he used to be, before everything changed. Then slowly he began to play. The first note came out wrong. Too hesitant, too soft. Daniel's fingers felt stiff on the keys like they belonged to someone else. Behind him he heard a few snickers. Someone whispered something he couldn't quite make out, but the tone was clear enough. They were already laughing at him. His mind raced back 7 years. He'd been 23, sitting in a practice room at the Westfield Conservatory. His professor, an elderly woman with silver hair and impossibly high standards, had just listened to him play this exact same piece. When he finished, she'd sat in silence for a full minute before speaking. You play like you're apologizing, she'd said. Like you're sorry for taking up space in the world. Chopin doesn't apologize. He feels everything and he isn't afraid of it. Neither should you be. Daniel had practiced for another 6 months after that. Learned to pour everything into the music, fear, joy, anger, love, all of it. By the time he graduated, he wasn't apologizing anymore. He was speaking. Really speaking. In a language that went deeper than words. But that was before life taught him that speaking wasn't always safe. That showing your heart could get it broken. That dreams were expensive luxuries when you had real problems to solve. He started the piece again. This time his fingers found their rhythm a little better. Muscle memory was a strange thing. You could bury it, ignore it, pretend it didn't exist, but it was still there waiting. Like riding a bicycle, like breathing. The nocturne in E-flat major begins gently, almost like a lullaby. Chopin wrote it when he was 20, but somehow he captured something ancient, something about longing and beauty and sadness all mixed together. The melody floats over the left hand like a conversation between hope and heartbreak. Daniel's hand started to remember. The stiffness began to fade. His right hand carried the melody while his left provided the foundation, steady and sure. He wasn't thinking about the notes anymore. They were just flowing. And then something unexpected happened. Memories came flooding back. Not the good ones he'd tucked away safely. The hard ones. the ones he usually kept locked down tight. He remembered the night his wife told him she was pregnant. They'd been in their tiny apartment, the one with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who played drums at midnight. She'd been scared. They both were. They barely had enough money for themselves, let alone a baby. But she'd smiled through her tears and said, "We'll figure it out. We always do." He remembered the day she got sick. Really sick. The kind of sick that doesn't just go away with rest and soup. The doctors had been kind but honest. Treatment was expensive. Very expensive. His scholarship covered his tuition, but it didn't cover medical bills or baby supplies or the 1,000 other things they suddenly needed. The choice hadn't felt like a choice at all. He'd withdrawn from the conservatory 3 months before graduation. Got a job. Then another job. Then a third. His professor had called him, begged him to find another way. "You have a gift," she'd said. "Don't throw it away." But what kind of man chose music over his family? What kind of father picked a piano over his child? His fingers pressed deeper into the keys now, the music swelling. The beautiful thing about the nocturne was how it changed. It started soft and gentle, but then it grew. It asked questions. It demanded answers. It refused to stay quiet. Daniel remembered his wife's last good day. They'd gone to the park, even though she was weak and needed a wheelchair. Their daughter had been 2 years old, running around chasing pigeons. His wife had held his hand and said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" He'd asked. "For all of this. For making you give up your dreams." He'd squeezed her hand tighter. "You didn't make me give up anything. I chose you. I'd choose you 1,000 times." She'd smiled, but her eyes were sad. "I know. That's what breaks my heart." The music was flowing faster now, Daniel's hands moving across the keys with growing confidence. The ballroom had gone completely silent. No more whispers. No more laughter. He could feel their attention on him like physical weight, but it didn't matter anymore. He wasn't playing for them. He was playing for his wife, who died 3 years ago on a Tuesday morning while he held her hand. He was playing for his daughter, who was 6 now and asked about her mother every day. He was playing for every bill collector who'd called. Every shift he'd worked when his body screamed for rest. Every moment he'd looked at his hands and wondered if they'd forgotten how to do anything except survive. The middle section of the nocturne is where Chopin gets complicated. The melody twists and turns, moving up the keyboard in patterns that shouldn't work but somehow do. It's like he's asking the same question over and over, each time in a different way. What is beauty? What is love? What does it cost? Daniel knew those answers now. Beauty was his daughter's laugh when he came home, no matter how tired he was. Love was working 3 jobs and never complaining because she needed to believe the world was good. The cost was everything else. Every dream, every possibility, every version of himself he might have been. But here's what Victoria and her wealthy friends didn't understand. Here's what his old professor had tried to teach him. You can't play Chopin properly unless you've lost something, unless you've loved something enough to sacrifice for it, unless you know what it feels like to be broken and still have to keep going. Technical skill could be taught. Emotion couldn't. You either felt it or you didn't. And Daniel felt everything. His hands were flying now, moving through the ornamental passages that made the nocturne famous. The notes cascaded like water, like light, like all the tears he'd never let himself cry because crying was a luxury he couldn't afford. The music filled the ballroom, and he was dimly aware that people had moved closer, that the room had rearranged itself around him and the piano. He thought about his daughter waiting at home. Their neighbor was watching her, a kind woman who never charged him because she understood what it meant to struggle. His daughter would be asleep by now, probably. She always tried to stay awake for him, but her medication made her drowsy. Tomorrow he'd need to call the hospital about the bill from last month. He'd need to work the morning shift at the warehouse, then the afternoon delivering food, then the evening driving for the rideshare app. He'd need to help his daughter with her homework and make sure she took her medicine and try to be present, even when exhaustion made his bones ache. But right now, for these few minutes, he was just playing, just letting his hands speak the language they'd learned years ago. Just being the person he used to be before life demanded he become someone else. The nocturne builds to a climax about 2/3 through. The melody reaches its highest point, the emotions at their peak, then gradually it begins to descend. The questions start finding answers. Not happy answers necessarily, not the endings you'd choose if you could write your own story. but honest answers, real ones. Daniel guided the music back down, his hands gentler now. The final section of the nocturne returns to where it began, but quieter, wiser, like someone who's survived a storm and is looking at the wreckage with clear eyes. It's beautiful and sad at the same time. That's what makes it perfect. His fingers moved through the last phrases, each note deliberate, each pause intentional. He could feel the ending coming, and part of him didn't want it to arrive, because when the music stopped, he'd have to go back to being just a delivery driver, just a struggling single father, just someone who used to have dreams, but the music had to end. That's how pieces work. They begin, they build, they finish. You can't hold on to them forever, no matter how much you want to. Daniel played the final chord, let it ring out into the silence. Then slowly he lifted his hands from the keys and opened his eyes. The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel sat at the piano, his hands still hovering above the keys, unsure what to do next. He could hear his own breathing. His heart was pounding so hard he wondered if the people behind him could hear it too. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster, then more people joined in. Within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted in applause. It wasn't polite charity gala clapping either. It was real. The kind of applause that comes from somewhere genuine. Daniel turned on the piano bench, bewildered. Several people were wiping their eyes. A woman in a red dress had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The bald man who'd been with Victoria earlier, Robert, was clapping hard enough that his glasses had slipped down his nose. And Victoria. She stood exactly where she'd been before, but everything about her had changed. The smug smile was gone. The sharp amusement in her eyes had vanished. She looked like someone who'd just witnessed something she couldn't quite explain, something that had reached past all her defenses and touched something she'd forgotten was there. She walked toward him slowly. The room quieted again, watching. When she reached the piano, she didn't say anything at first. Just looked at him with an expression Daniel couldn't read. Confusion, respect, something else. Finally, she opened the small silver purse she'd been carrying, pulled out her wallet. It was designer leather, probably cost more than Daniel made in a month. She opened it and removed several bills, hundreds. He counted at least 7 of them as she held them out. You won, she said quietly. Her voice had lost its edge. Fair and square, Daniel stood and took the money. His hands were shaking slightly. $700. That would cover the specialist appointment next month. Maybe even leave enough for groceries. He folded the bills carefully and put them in his jacket pocket. Thank you, he managed to say. Victoria nodded, but she was still looking at him with that strange expression, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Where did you study? You didn't learn to play like that from YouTube videos. Daniel hesitated. He didn't usually talk about his past. It felt too much like opening old wounds. But something about the moment made him honest. Westfield Conservatory. 7 years ago. I didn't graduate. Why not? Life happened. It was the simplest answer he could give. The truest one, too. Victoria's jaw tightened slightly. She glanced back at her guests who were still watching with interest. Then she made a decision. Robert, keep everyone entertained for a moment. I need to speak with our pianist privately. She gestured for Daniel to follow her. He did, confused but curious. She led him out of the ballroom, down a hallway lined with expensive art, and into a smaller room that looked like an office. Books on the shelves, a desk with a computer, a window overlooking the city. She closed the door behind them and leaned against it. For a long moment she just studied him. Daniel felt uncomfortable under her gaze but held his ground. My father died 2 years ago, Victoria said abruptly. Heart attack. He was playing that same nocturne when it happened. Fell forward onto the keys. The sound brought my mother running, but it was too late. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. I'm sorry. She waved a hand dismissively, but there was pain in the gesture. Don't be. He had a good life. Built this hotel from nothing. Made a fortune. Did everything he set out to do. She paused. Except convince me that any of it mattered. What do you mean? Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. My father believed in beauty. In art, in music. He thought those things were what made life worth living. He used to tell me that money was just a tool, but art was the point. She laughed, but it sounded bitter. I thought he was soft, sentimental. I spent my whole adult life proving I was tougher than him, harder, better at business. I tripled what he built. Tripled it? And you know what he said when I told him? Daniel shook his head. He said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart, but can you still see the stars?" Victoria turned back to face him. I had no idea what he meant. Thought it was just more of his philosophical nonsense. But then tonight, watching you play, she trailed off. "I saw my father in you," she continued, "the way you played. Like the music mattered more than anything. Like you were having a conversation with something bigger than yourself. My father played the same way, and I realized I haven't felt anything that real in years, maybe ever." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't trying to make anyone feel anything. I just played, I know. That's what made it powerful." Victoria crossed her arms, but it looked more defensive than aggressive now. "Tell me something honestly. Why did you accept my challenge? You must have known I was mocking you." He had known. Of course he had. But the answer was simple. "My daughter needs a specialist appointment next month. Insurance doesn't cover all of it. I needed the money. Your daughter. Is she sick?" Daniel nodded. "She has a heart condition. Nothing life-threatening right now, but it needs monitoring. Regular checkups. Sometimes medication adjustments. It's expensive." Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "What's her name?" "Lily, she's 6, and her mother died 3 years ago, cancer." The word still hurt to say. Probably always would. Victoria looked down at her hands. Her perfectly manicured nails. Her expensive rings. "I've spent 10 years building an empire," she said. 10 years proving I'm nothing like my sentimental father. And in one night, a delivery driver with a sick daughter reminded me of everything I've been running from." She looked up at Daniel. "Do you know what my father's last words to me were? He was in the hospital hooked up to machines. I was telling him about a business deal I'd just closed. Very proud of myself. And he took my hand and said, 'Victoria, when I'm gone, don't let my money become your prison. Use it for something that matters.'" I didn't understand what he meant, Victoria continued. I thought I was already using it for things that mattered. Growing the business, creating jobs, building wealth. But watching you tonight, I finally understood. He didn't mean money. He meant legacy. Real legacy. The kind that changes people's lives. Daniel wasn't sure where this was going, but he could feel the conversation shifting into something bigger than he'd expected. Victoria made a decision. He could see it happen in her expression. "I want to start a foundation," she said. "A music scholarship program. For people like you. Talented people who can't afford to pursue their gifts because life gets in the way. People who have to choose between art and survival." Daniel blinked. "That's a nice idea." "It's more than an idea. I'm going to do it, and I want you to help me." "Me? I'm not qualified to run a foundation." "No, but you're qualified to identify talent, to understand what these students need, to teach them." Victoria pulled out her phone. "I'm serious about this. I'll pay you. Part-time at first so you can keep your other income stable, but I want you involved. I want to build something my father would have been proud of." Daniel felt overwhelmed. This was too much, too fast. "Why? You don't even know me." "You're right, I don't, but I know how you play. I know you sacrificed your dreams for your daughter. I know you accepted a humiliating challenge because you needed money. And then you turned it into something beautiful. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." She held out her hand. "I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I'm asking you to meet me next Tuesday. We'll discuss details. If you don't like what you hear, you can walk away, but at least hear me out." Daniel looked at her outstretched hand. This could be a mistake. Rich people made promises all the time that disappeared in the morning light. He'd learned to be careful about hope. It was expensive and dangerous. But then he thought about Lily, about the money in his pocket that would help but wouldn't solve everything. About the piano and how it felt to play again after 3 years. About dreams that didn't have to stay buried forever. He shook Victoria's hand. "Tuesday. What time?" She smiled. A real smile this time, not the mocking one from earlier. 2 o'clock. "Come to the hotel. We'll talk over coffee." Daniel nodded. "Okay, but I need to get home now." "My daughter." "Of course." Victoria walked him back through the hallway toward the lobby. The gala was still going in the ballroom, but the energy had shifted. People were talking animatedly. He caught fragments of conversation as they passed. "Incredible. Did you see?" "So moving." At the door, Victoria stopped him. "Daniel, that's your name, right?" He'd never actually told her, but the concierge probably had his information from the delivery. Yes, thank you for tonight. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Then he walked out into the night, $700 richer and carrying the strange weight of unexpected possibility. Daniel didn't expect Victoria to remember. Rich people said a lot of things they didn't mean, especially after a few drinks and an emotional evening. By Monday morning, he'd half convinced himself that Tuesday's meeting would never happen. She'd forget, or change her mind, or realize the whole thing was just a nice idea that didn't make business sense. But Monday afternoon, his phone rang. Unknown number, is this Daniel? A professional voice, female, probably an assistant. Yes. I'm calling from the Grandview Hotel. Miss Ashford asked me to confirm your meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock. She's also arranged for parking validation, so please bring your ticket to the front desk. Daniel stared at his phone after she hung up. She remembered. She actually remembered. Tuesday morning, he told Lily he had an important meeting. She was coloring at the kitchen table, her dark hair falling in her face the way her mother's used to. She looked up with those big eyes that always made his heart hurt. What kind of meeting? A job thing, maybe, I'm not sure yet. Will you be gone long? There was worry in her voice. She didn't like when he was gone. 3 jobs meant he was gone a lot. Just a couple hours. Mrs. Chen next door will check on you, okay? Lily nodded but didn't look happy. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart. When you played the piano the other night, were you thinking about Mommy? Daniel's throat tightened. He'd told Lily about the hotel, about the challenge, but he'd kept the emotional parts to himself. Or so he thought. Kids always knew more than you wanted them to. Yeah, I was. I thought so. You looked sad when you came home. She went back to her coloring, but also kind of happy. Like remembering her didn't just hurt. Daniel knelt beside her chair. Remembering her always hurts a little. But you're right. It felt good to play again. I didn't realize how much I missed it. Maybe you should play more. She said it simply, like it was obvious. Like the solution to everything was just right there if adults weren't so complicated about things. He kissed the top of her head. Maybe I should. The Grandview Hotel looked different in daylight. Less intimidating somehow. Daniel parked in the garage and took the elevator up to the lobby. The same concierge from Friday night was there, but this time he smiled and directed Daniel to a private meeting room on the 2nd floor. Victoria was already there, sitting at a table with papers spread out in front of her. She'd traded the silver gown for a business suit, her hair still pulled back severely. She looked up when he entered and stood to shake his hand. You came. Good. I wasn't entirely sure you would. I wasn't entirely sure you'd remember, Daniel admitted. She smiled slightly. I don't forget things that matter. Sit, coffee? They spent the first few minutes on small talk while she poured coffee from a carafe. Then she got down to business. She'd already drafted a plan for the foundation. The Ashford Music Initiative, she was calling it. Full scholarships for talented music students from low-income families. Not just tuition, but living expenses, instruments, everything. I've allocated $2 million to start, she said, sliding a document across the table. That should fund at least 20 students in the first year. More as we grow. Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. $2 million? Is that not enough? I can increase it. No, I mean, that's an incredible amount of money. Victoria shrugged. It's sitting in accounts doing nothing. My father always said money should move, should do something. This is something. She pointed to another section of the document. This is where you come in. I need someone to evaluate applicants. Someone who understands talent but also understands struggle. Someone who can identify students who need this the most. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that. You're more qualified than you think. You've lived it. You know what it's like to choose between music and survival. That perspective is invaluable. She leaned forward. I'm also opening a music education wing at the community center downtown. I want you to teach there. 3 afternoons a week to start. Piano, music theory, whatever you think these kids need. Daniel felt dizzy. This was real. She was actually serious. What about pay? $40 an hour for teaching, plus a consultant fee for helping evaluate scholarship applications. Call it $60,000 a year total. Part-time, like I said. You can keep your other jobs until you feel stable. $60,000. That was more than he made from all 3 jobs combined, and it was only part-time. He could cut back on the delivery driving. Spend more time with Lily. Maybe even have enough left over to start saving. Why are you doing this? He asked. And really, is this guilt? Some kind of redemption project? Victoria sat back in her chair. She was quiet for a long moment. Maybe partly, she admitted. But it's more than that. After you left Friday night, I couldn't stop thinking about what my father said. About legacy. About what matters. I've spent a decade building wealth, and for what? To have more money? To win at business? Those things don't mean anything if they don't connect to something real. She gestured to the papers on the table. This is real. This is students who won't have to make the choice you made, who won't have to give up their gifts because life got hard. And honestly, Daniel, I need this as much as they do. I need to do something that would make my father proud. Something that means more than just numbers in a bank account. Daniel looked at the document in front of him. It was detailed, professional. She'd clearly spent the entire weekend working on this. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good at teaching? Then we'll figure it out together. I'm not good at this either. I'm good at business, at making money. But changing lives? That's new territory for both of us. She smiled. Besides, you can't be worse than some of the teachers I had. I once had a piano instructor who threw sheet music at students when they made mistakes. Daniel laughed despite himself. That sounds traumatic. It was. But it also taught me that credentials don't equal ability. Some of the best teachers are people who've struggled, who understand what it means to fight for something. She slid a pen across the table. What do you say? Want to help me build something that matters? Daniel picked up the pen. His hand was shaking slightly. This was too good to be true. But maybe sometimes good things actually happened. Maybe sometimes rich people kept their promises. Maybe sometimes the universe decided you'd struggled enough and threw you a break. He signed the contract. Over the next 3 months, Daniel's life transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. He cut his delivery shifts down to just weekends. Started teaching at the community center on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoons. The first day, 7 kids showed up. The second week, 12. By the end of the first month, he had a waiting list. The kids were like he'd been, hungry for music but without resources. Some had natural talent. Others just had determination. He taught them all, trying to give them what his old professor had given him. Not just technique, but permission to feel. To use music as a language when words weren't enough. Lily started coming to some of his classes. She'd sit in the corner doing homework or just watching. One day she asked if she could try the piano. Daniel lifted her onto the bench and showed her middle C. Within 2 weeks, she was picking out simple melodies. Within a month, she was begging for her own lessons. You have your mom's ear, Daniel told her one evening after she'd successfully played through Mary Had a Little Lamb with both hands. Really? Her face lit up. Really? She used to sing all the time. Even when she was sick, she'd hum. You have that same musicality. Lily looked at the keys thoughtfully. I'm glad I got something from her. Sometimes I worry I'll forget what she was like. Daniel pulled her close. You won't forget. I promise. And every time you play, you'll feel connected to her. Music does that. It bridges gaps. Victoria stayed involved too, more than Daniel expected. She attended student recitals, met with families, even sat in on a few lessons, though she admitted she had no musical ability herself. She and Daniel developed an unlikely friendship. She'd call him sometimes just to talk, to ask his advice about the foundation, to share ideas. One evening, about 4 months after that first meeting, Victoria invited Daniel and Lily to dinner at the hotel. It was casual, she said, just a thank you for all his work. But when they arrived, the private dining room was decorated and there was a cake. What's this? Daniel asked. We hit our first milestone. 25 students enrolled. Full scholarships. Victoria grinned. I thought we should celebrate. And Lily, I heard from your dad that you're learning piano too. Lily nodded shyly. I'm not very good yet. Yet, Victoria emphasized. That's the important word. You know what your dad told me once? He said everyone starts as a beginner. The only difference between beginners and masters is time and practice. So keep practicing. After dinner, Victoria pulled Daniel aside. I have something to show you. She led him to a hallway where a plaque had been mounted on the wall. It read, The Ashford Music Initiative, founded in memory of Richard Ashford, who believed that art gives life meaning. Established by Victoria Ashford and Daniel Torres, who proved him right. Daniel stared at the plaque, his name right there next to hers. Equal partners in something bigger than either of them. I couldn't have done this without you, Victoria said quietly. You gave me the courage to try, to believe my father wasn't just sentimental but actually wise. Thank you. Daniel felt his eyes sting. I should be thanking you. You changed my life. Lily's life. We changed each other's lives, Victoria corrected. That's how the best partnerships work. As Daniel drove home that night, Lily asleep in the passenger seat, he thought about how strange life was. One delivery, one challenge, one performance had shifted everything. He still missed his wife every day, still struggled sometimes, still worried about money, about Lily's health, about the future. But now he also had hope, purpose, a reminder that dreams didn't have to die just because life got hard. They could just hibernate, waiting for the right moment to wake up again. 1 year after that night at the Grandview Hotel, Daniel stood backstage at the community center, listening to his students warm up. The annual recital. 50 people in the audience. Nothing fancy, but it mattered. These performances mattered more than any concert he'd ever attended at the conservatory. His star student, a 14-year-old named Maya, was pacing nervously. She'd grown up in the same neighborhood where Daniel lived. Single mom, 3 siblings. No money for lessons until the foundation found her. Now she was playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the real version, not the simplified one. I'm going to mess up, Maya said, wringing her hands. I know I am. There's this one part in the third movement where my fingers always tangle. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. You know what my professor told me once? She said perfection isn't the goal. Connection is. If you miss a note but you make people feel something, you've succeeded. If you play perfectly but leave people cold, you've failed. That's easy to say when you're not the one performing. Daniel smiled. I've been where you are. I know it's terrifying. But here's the thing. Everyone in that audience wants you to succeed. They're on your side. Your mom is out there crying before you've even started. Mrs. Peterson from the foundation brought tissues. You've already won. Now just go out there and tell your story. Maya took a deep breath and nodded. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage with her chin up. Daniel watched from the wings as she sat at the piano and began to play. She was brilliant. Not perfect. She did stumble in the third movement exactly where she'd predicted. But she recovered, kept going, and poured everything into the ending. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Her mother was indeed crying along with half the audience. Later, after all the students had performed, Victoria took the microphone. She'd been sitting in the front row, watching every performance with the intensity of someone who'd discovered something precious. Before we close tonight, Victoria said, I want to share something. When I started this foundation, I thought I was doing it for my father, to honor his memory, to prove I understood what he'd been trying to teach me about legacy. She paused, looking around the room. But somewhere along the way, I realized this wasn't about him. It wasn't even about me. It was about all of you. She gestured to the students. Every person who performed tonight represents a story, a struggle, a dream that almost didn't happen. Maya almost gave up music because her family couldn't afford a piano. Jordan over there almost quit because his friends made fun of him for playing classical music. Lily, Daniel's daughter, almost never discovered she had her mother's gift for melody. Daniel felt his throat tighten at the mention of his daughter. Lily was sitting in the front row next to Maya's mom, beaming with pride. She'd performed earlier, playing a simple piece she'd composed herself. Nothing complex, but it was hers. Original, real. But here's what I've learned this year, Victoria continued. Talent isn't rare. Talent is everywhere. It's in every neighborhood, every school, every economic class. What's rare is opportunity. What's rare is someone believing in you enough to invest. Not just money, but time, attention, faith. She looked directly at Daniel. My father used to say that people are like pianos, complex instruments capable of extraordinary beauty, but most go unplayed. Most never reach their potential because no one takes the time to learn their particular music. Daniel taught me that. He didn't just teach these students to play, he taught me to listen. Victoria's voice wavered slightly. So tonight isn't just a recital, it's a celebration of second chances, of dreams that refuse to die, of the fact that sometimes, if you're very lucky, a stranger walks into your hotel and reminds you what matters. She raised her glass of sparkling cider. to music, to courage, to every person who refuses to let circumstances define their future. The audience raised their glasses and applauded. Daniel felt someone tug his sleeve. It was Lily. "Daddy, Miss Victoria's crying. Is she okay?" Daniel looked at Victoria, who was indeed wiping her eyes with a tissue Mrs. Peterson had provided. "She's more than okay, sweetheart. She's happy." After the recital, people lingered. Parents talked to Daniel, thanking him. Students showed their families around the music room. Victoria stood in a corner, talking quietly with Maya's mother about expanding the program to include voice lessons. An older man approached Daniel. He had silver hair and kind eyes that reminded Daniel of his own professor from years ago. "You don't know me," the man said, "but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Thomas Reed. I teach at Westfield Conservatory." Daniel's heart skipped. His old school. "Nice to meet you. I heard about what you're doing here. The foundation, the teaching," Thomas smiled. "Your old professor, Dr. Martinez, she talks about you sometimes. Says you were one of the most naturally gifted students she ever taught. She was heartbroken when you had to leave." "Life happened," Daniel said simply. "It always does." Thomas pulled out a business card. "I came tonight because I wanted to see for myself. What you've built here, it's remarkable. These kids adore you. More importantly, they trust you. That's rare. I just try to give them what she gave me." Thomas nodded. "She'd be proud. But I also came to offer you something. We have an opening for an adjunct professor, part-time, teaching piano and music theory. The pay isn't great, but it would give you access to the conservatory facilities, and it would let you complete your degree if you wanted. We could work around your schedule here." Daniel stared at him. "You're offering me a teaching position? At Westfield? We need people who understand what music really is. Not just notes on a page, but a lifeline, a language. You understand that in your bones." Thomas gestured around the room. "This proves it, so yes. I'm offering you a position. Think about it. No pressure. But the door is open if you want to walk through it." After Thomas left, Daniel stood in the empty music room for a long time. The piano sat silent in the corner. The same upright Victoria had donated when the program started. Not a Steinway, but it held tune and had good action. It was enough. He sat down and played a few notes. No particular piece. Just sounds. Thoughts turned into music. A year ago, he'd been delivering food and wondering how to pay next month's bills. Now he was teaching, building something, and apparently he had a chance to finish what he'd started 7 years ago. Victoria found him there. "Everyone's gone. You okay?" "Someone just offered me a teaching position at Westfield." "My old school." Victoria's face lit up. "Daniel, that's wonderful. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know." "It means more time away from Lily. More commitments. More risks." Victoria sat beside him on the piano bench. "Can I tell you something my father used to say? He said the biggest risk in life isn't trying and failing. It's succeeding at something that doesn't matter while ignoring what does." She bumped his shoulder lightly. "You matter. Your music matters. Your teaching matters. Don't shrink from that because you're scared. I'm not scared of failing. I'm scared of wanting something too much, of hoping too hard. I understand that. I spent 10 years afraid to hope for anything except profit margins and stock prices. Safe things. Quantifiable things." She looked at the piano. "But you taught me something. You taught me that safe isn't the same as meaningful, and that sometimes the scariest thing we can do is believe we deserve good things." Daniel thought about Lily, about how she'd started composing her own music, about Maya and Jordan and all the other students who walked through these doors with dreams bigger than their circumstances, about his wife who told him to keep playing even when everything was falling apart. "She'd want you to say yes," Victoria said quietly, reading his mind. "Your wife, she'd want you to take the job, to finish your degree, to become everything you were meant to be. How do you know? Because she loved you enough to let you sacrifice everything for her. That kind of love doesn't want you to stay stuck. It wants you to fly." Victoria stood up. "Think about it. But Daniel, you've spent years taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time to take care of your dreams too." After she left, Daniel sat at the piano and played the nocturne, the same piece from that night at the hotel. But it sounded different now. Less like grief and more like gratitude. Less like an ending and more like a beginning. When he got home, Lily was still awake, sitting at their kitchen table with sheet music spread out in front of her. She was composing again, humming softly as she wrote notes. "Hey, sweetheart, You should be asleep. She looked up with her mother's eyes. I had an idea for a song. I didn't want to forget it. Daniel looked at his daughter, at her determination, at the way she approached music with joy instead of obligation. She'd never had to sacrifice her dreams. She got to pursue them from the beginning, supported and encouraged. That was what he'd given her. That was his real legacy. Play it for me, he said. Lily smiled and went to their small keyboard. She played her composition. It was simple but beautiful. And when she finished, she said, I'm writing this for Mommy so she can hear it wherever she is. Daniel pulled her into a hug, tears streaming down his face. She can hear it. I promise you she can, and she's so proud of you, just like I am. That night after Lily was asleep, Daniel pulled out Thomas Reed's business card. He looked at it for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and sent an email. 3 words, I accept, thank you. Some stories don't have neat endings. Life isn't like that. Daniel still worried about money sometimes, still missed his wife every single day, still had moments of doubt and fear, but he also had something he'd lost along the way. Purpose, hope, the knowledge that dreams could bend and adapt and survive, even when everything tried to crush them. And every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, he walked into that community center and taught kids that they mattered, that their music mattered, that no circumstance, no struggle, no setback could take away what was inside them. That was legacy, real legacy, not money or buildings or achievements, but the lives you touched, the doors you opened, the belief you sparked in someone else that they deserved to dream. Victoria understood that now. Daniel had always understood it. And together, they built something neither could have created alone, something that would outlast them both, something that proved her father right. Art did give life meaning, and sometimes, one person's courage to play could change everything.